Okay, cool. So we guys are ready?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Okay, so
what happens?
Yeah. Hi guys, welcome to Solopacker podcast. How are you today?
Yeah, good, thanks.
Yeah.
Good to be back.
Hi Vicky, how are you? Hi Adi. Okay. So Vicky, she's gonna she has been traveling for quite a while as a backpacker, and she's actually the first travel buddy of Adi, who is here as well. He is a friend from Singapore, and today, we're gonna talk about. What are we gonna talk about?
Vicky, have you decided what you want to talk about?
Yeah, I was kind of saying that I feel like I've had a bit of a different experience rather than just packing a backpack and going kind of on an endless road. My way of doing things was to train as a scuba diving instructor and then essentially get jobs as a dive instructor and kind of be in a different country, and then from there sort of travel around for a few months afterwards, and I guess just talk about that experience and what it's like to make money in the country essentially.
Yeah, awesome. That sounds great.
And get to know people a bit more and a place a bit more.
Yeah, that sounds great to me. Tell us more.
So back in 2016, or rather I've had it like scuba diving as a hobby for a long time. So back in 2016, I decided that I wanted to be an instructor. So I quit my job in England and organised my instructor training course on a little island called Utila that's extremely popular.
What was your job before? What was your job before the scuba diving?
An environmental consultant, basically.
Oh, wow. So it's quite a change, right?
Yeah, huge change. Yeah, I studied chemistry at university, so it was, just a big change to pack my job in and go off travelling, essentially.
So adventurous.
Went and did the scuba diving instructor course, which was just a huge step to obviously go to the other side of the world. And it was nice to have that structure of the course, kind of something to go and aim for a few weeks. And then having got that qualification, got another job, or my first job rather, afterwards in Iceland, and then was there for 8 months in the end.
There's scuba diving in Iceland?
Yeah, it's beautiful scuba diving in Iceland.
I mean, when I think about Iceland, I always think about ice and winter. No, really. Like people actually, there is a beach there where people go to swim.
Yeah, completely. I saw people diving just in their swimming costume. Not diving, swimming.
Wow.
In like a swimming costume, and I thought it was hilarious. Yeah, there were two of them diving in a swimming costume with gloves and booties on.
Isn't it because of some ocean currents that make, even though Iceland is fairly far north of the equator, but there's a bunch of ocean currents that keep the coast? Or is that Scotland or Iceland? Maybe I'm getting my facts wrong.
So the most famous scuba diving in Iceland is actually freshwater. So it's a lake kind of in the middle of the country, but kind of south, really, not so far away from Reykjavik. And it's this amazing spring. And because the country is on two tectonic plates that are literally tearing it apart and slowly making the country bigger, there are these huge, great big fissures that were literally the rocks have cracked under the pressure of the earth moving. And so in that area, there's a big glacier in the distance. And as that melts, the water gets filtered through all the volcanic rock and it comes out in some of these fissures. And it's just the most beautiful, clear water you've ever seen, because it's literally spring water that's filtered through all the volcanic rock. And it's fresh, clear water with like no nutrients in it. So very little lives in it.
Is it in Iceland where you have like this, hot springs and there are monkeys inside?
Definitely no monkeys.
No monkeys? I saw the picture. Don't you guys remember?
I think that's in Japan.
Oh, it was in Japan. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Again, interesting fact about Iceland, that there are the only mammal that's actually native to Iceland is the Arctic fox, which is pretty cool.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah. Oh. So the farmers there now farm a lot of sheep, and I believe there are other places that probably have reindeer. But definitely no monkeys. But there are hot springs, so there's lots of hot water. Because again, Iceland is basically this big I want to say pimple, basically, where like that magma is coming up out of the crust and just forming this little lump that is, the country of Iceland. Don't want to
definitely sounds like a
I love it.
So it was quite a change for you coming from England, right?
Yeah, it's a huge change. I just absolutely love the Nordic culture and things. And it was good, to be fair, that I'd gone on holiday to Iceland before. It probably also helped me get the job that I kind of say that I've been to the country and I absolutely loved it. And I'd love to come and work here.
Nice. So, wow.
And so that was the spectacular cold water. Then there is also diving in the sea in the north. Mm-hmm. So you are right, Addy, that the currents in the Atlantic Ocean do kind of keep Iceland and the UK much kind of more temperate. So warmer in the winter times, because obviously places like Montreal and New York and stuff on the other side of the Atlantic, they don't have that same Gulf Stream, so they get snow and freezing temperatures. And obviously Iceland gets freezing temperatures because it's so far north, but that's what keeps the UK more temperate, is the current.
So I'm just curious then, because I know a bunch of people in Southeast Asia who call themselves digital nomads, right? So because they're very clear in their heads that they want to travel, and the jobs that they take up is a means to an end. But in your case, it sounds like you wanted to train yourself as a diver, and the travel just happens to kind of be there.
Yeah, kind of, or at least I saw it as a skill and a job that I knew I could take all over the world. And again, because I'd fortunately been diving in the UK as a hobby for a long time, it meant that I had experience of cold and warm waters. So rather than kind of going to Thailand and learning in hot water and then staying in hot water, which obviously a lot of people do, and that's what they love.
Yep.
And scuba diving for a lot of people is about being whatever in your bikini and your board shorts and diving in lovely blue water. But for me, I really like diving in a dry suit, and I like diving in cold areas, so it meant that literally the whole globe was open to me.
So at least the waters in Iceland are cold, right?
Yeah, they're pretty cold.
Okay. At least I got that one right. Okay.
Like the water is about 3 or 4 degrees C in like the most famous fishes. It's pretty cold. And the sea is obviously a bit warmer. Yeah.
So I wanted to get Vicky's timeline right, because I know for a fact that she went to New Zealand as well. So how long was Iceland and how long was New Zealand?
Yeah, both 8 months each.
Okay.
It's pretty handy. So yeah. I did the Northern Hemisphere summer in Iceland, and then obviously the Southern Hemisphere summer.
Why was it 8 months in particular? Is it because in Chinese culture, for example, 8 is a lucky number? Was it the same for you?
Really? No, it wasn't at all. That was just how kind of long my contract was. Basically, it's a seasonal contract.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Actually, I think my contract in New Zealand was a little bit shorter, and then I just spent some time afterwards traveling around. Yeah. No, I didn't know that 8 was a lucky number.
But is it to do with, because at least the impression that we have in this part of the world is travel is still kind of it's a wish item, it's not a needs item. So you find a job, like I'm speaking for folks who are boring and conventional like myself, but you find a job and then you save up money for that 1 or 2 solo travels around the world. Although there are a bunch of people now in Southeast Asia who are digital nomads, and I've always asked myself, is it helpful that if you're a citizen of a country that does provide you welfare if you're unemployed, or if you're quote unquote unemployed, and does England provide that kind of cushion for solo travelers?
As in, if something was to happen to me abroad, I could fly back and get free healthcare?
No, more like let's say if you claim that you're unemployed, there will be some unemployment benefits that could possibly sponsor your travels.
No, I don't think that the employment benefits here sponsor your travels. Absolutely not. You would just be unemployed and you'd be traveling, and you'd have to either have the savings or be working in the countries that you are abroad, because basically the support system here in the UK is called the Job Seekers Allowance, which means that you have to regularly turn up and prove that you are trying to
Oh, I
go to going for
see.
interviews.
Right.
You can't just sign up and go off traveling.
You know, actually, I've actually heard about one guy. He was from America, and his ethnicity, you know, was like from somewhere from Eastern Europe, and he applied for a scholarship from U.S. government to cover his traveling expenses to his motherland, and he got that scholarship to travel.
Wow.
And then another guy I met, he was from Australia. And what he did is he filed for unemployment in Australia. And I think he told me that he got about $300 to $400 a month. And then he was just traveling.
No way.
Yeah. I was like, oh my God, how can you do that? He was like, yeah, that's what I do. He was doing it for a really long time. Like, I don't know, for 3 or 4 years. I was like, wow, I couldn't do that. No. Yeah.
Yeah. But I also found I really like the fact that by earning money in the countries that I wanted to travel around, that then you open a bank account or they pay you in US dollars in cash. And then you have that money in that bank account to travel around and you don't have transfer fees or.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sometimes they can get quite high.
Yeah, exactly. Or exchange rates obviously fluctuating and things. So I quite like that idea and having that security.
Mm-hmm.
But also having that cultural experience. I feel like a lot of people go traveling and they want to really embed themselves and experience the country rather than be seen as tourists. So kind of almost part of the being abroad and that traveling experience is seeing how different, that sounds really dull, but seeing how like different bank transactions and different bank accounts work, and it's kind of things that you just take for granted. Like I take for granted in the UK that you can just get cash out of any ATM, no matter what the bank is, for free. But in New Zealand, they still charge you, or they did until fairly recently. If you have one kind of bank account and you take money out of a different bank's ATM, the different bank will still charge you like a percentage or a small amount for using it. And I just thought, really, does that still happen around the world? Or like my bank account in Iceland, they just had a rolling charge for me having a bank account. And I didn't realize that banks did that. Again, in the UK, if you have a bank account that charges you a little bit, then you also have additional perks like holiday insurance or like phone insurance, car insurance and things.
Oh.
Yeah. So there's
good.
tiny little things that really aren't that interesting when people think about traveling, but just how different systems work.
Mm-hmm. Did you notice like the difference of, for example, British people's relationship to work and I don't know, people from Iceland and from New Zealand? How do they relate to work?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I think in the dive industry, a lot of the time it is foreigners coming over. So you're not necessarily working with local people. I mean, I was working with local people in New Zealand, and there was one local person on a team in Iceland. That's a tough one, because I think in tourism, they're different kinds of people. And I think it's more evident kind of in day-to-day work here in the UK, the way that different people work and attitudes to work, probably because that's more of a kind of maybe a career option, or they've come over here specifically for the exchange rate to then whether have a better kind of quality of life here to either go back to a country with a poorer exchange rate kind of thing.
Because in US, for example, there's a saying that Americans, they live to work, but for example in South America they work to live. Yeah
Exactly.
More like work to travel.
Work to travel.
At least that's how I've managed to save money since my first travels like 11-12 years ago. I always made sure, because I sure as heck was not going to spend any money on expensive gadgets or expensive clothes. So my only the sin expense that I had, so to speak, was my travel budget. So I will keep a big fat part of my salary, my earnings, set aside, and then just go traveling.
A huge change kind of in a new generation of people that are coming through. And as I understand it, kind of a lot less people in this country are spending money on alcohol and going to the pub and things.
Right.
They're saving that more for experiences. And I think that's definitely a shift in attitude that a lot of people around the world are having, that they'd rather have amazing experiences than have material goods.
Right. And I think there's just an perhaps a misconception, or perhaps an exaggerated preconceived notion that because I see Igor's pictures from a fancy place, I just happen to assume that she is of higher financial standing. But it's not. That's not necessarily the case, because Vicky, you remember, right, when we went with that group to Malaysia, to Taman Negara, we were freaking destitute students. We were saving every freaking penny we could. So just to share, Igor, with you and your listeners, right? We bought, I believe, a can of tuna and a loaf of bread. And I honestly, Vicky, I may be wrong, but I don't remember buying anything else for our meals, but just like canned tuna and bread. And we were 18, 19, around there. And I kind of stuck to that spirit of not eating. It's not about not eating well, but it's about where do you really want to maximize your dollar. And I follow that principle even up to this day, despite the fact that, I am of much better financial standing than I was when I was a student. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it really kind of hit home. It took me a few years to realize. I can't remember what country it was in. Definitely somewhere in Southeast Asia. It might have been Malaysia, where I remember people kind of hassling us and saying, "Oh, you want to spend your money over here, blah blah blah." And me, as kind of a young 19-year-old, went, "No, I'm a student. I don't have any money." And then you're a student, you don't have any money. And I was like, yeah, and I thought that was a perfectly valid excuse not to be buying their things. I'm like, no,
right.
Student support. But a few years later, it took a while for it to properly sink in that they're like, you don't have a job, you don't have any money, and yet here you are in this foreign country, not working. You do have money. You really are of a higher financial standing than the majority of people on this planet.
Right.
Well,
Yeah.
I think
they want any money.
Yeah, it's for a lot of people. Like you guys, also yesterday when we talked about traveling, Vicky, you shared that, and you, Adi, as well, that you really started like from really small budgets as you were students. Actually, in my student life, I didn't travel much because I didn't have the finances to do so. But once I graduated, I started because I was working hard, and then I saved enough to travel. Mm-hmm. And I remember I was staying in good hostels. I would always check the reviews to make sure it was good. I would use public transport. But as I look into my life now, over the past 4 years, my budget is getting lower and lower. Really. For example, my last trip was my first trip when I did hitchhiking, for example. I never did it before. I was sleeping in a tent, for example, and staying in the cheapest hostels for $1. So, Adi, I might correct you on saying that, I'm of better financial standing here.
Yeah,
so, of course, it's also more about experience as well, but yeah.
Yeah, definitely kind of, obviously, I was really fortunate that I left my job, so I had all the time in the world to go and stay and work and to put down and work for 8 months. And then, fortunately, the days off that I had from my job in Iceland, I could go and explore the country. And obviously, I was kind of lucky enough because I was in Reykjavik and kind of making friends and stuff. We could just pick up and go, "Oh, what are you doing on your days off? Let's go to this place or go to that place," or just like you kind of would do in a normal home country in your kind of career jobs. I'd take a week or two and just go exploring in the country that I was working and living in at the time.
Right.
But obviously, that's very much down to the time that you have.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I suppose we have to be mindful that if I put myself in the shoes of a person who perhaps even as a student has to earn some money on the side to support his or her family. If I had that obligation, thankfully I didn't, or rather fortunately I didn't, but if I had that obligation, I would probably not start traveling until I graduated and had a full-time job. The other perhaps more practical restriction that I see, at least in my social circle, where people are from different countries of Southeast Asia. So if you have a passport of one of the Southeast Asian countries, travel is pretty much visa free across the 9 ASEAN countries, Southeast Asian countries. However, a person traveling with, let's say, passport from country A going to, I don't know, Japan or South America. They have very different visa restrictions as opposed to holding a Singapore passport. That again is a burden because visa fees can be really, like, it could sometimes be as high as your actual flight ticket, even if you take the cheapest, the most budget flight. Those are, I believe, far more real restrictions and hurdles for people to kind of step out for their first solo travel. But if those are not really your hurdles, then I don't know, I kind of want to insist that you kind of have a moral obligation to save money and just at least have one trip to a culture that you totally don't understand or you totally don't have any idea about.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a tough one to call it a moral obligation, I think. Like, I definitely would highly recommend that people go and try to see the world if they have the inclination to. But I can remember talking to someone at some point saying that he was trying to encourage his daughter to go traveling. And I was like, well, if she doesn't want to go, I think you definitely have to be in the right mindset. It has to be your choice to go and do that, because otherwise you could throw yourself to the other side of the world and just be so homesick and just not enjoy it at all, but be kind of doing it because you feel you should do it. Kind of whatever, being in your 20s and going, oh, everyone else is doing it, so I've got to go over there. And if you don't kind of go with whatever, not necessarily an objective, but with the right kind of mindset and a desire and a curiosity to find out more or kind of be in a different place. Otherwise, I think it could be, pretty disastrous if you haven't made that choice yourself.
Yeah, well, I think also, a lot of people, they don't travel because they think they cannot afford it. So, for example, when I go hitchhiking or when I stay in the cheapest hostels, I always share with my experience saying you can actually travel for free. Well, if you don't consider the visa applications and visa fees. But really, right now, travel is so affordable. Like, you really, it's like, I think it's possible to travel for free. And I actually met people who travel, like, not even spending a dime. I think I told you the story of a Russian woman, right, Adi? She was traveling. No. So I met her in Armenia, and she was traveling. Like, she has her tent, sleeping bag, everything in her backpack, and she even had a buckwheat. And all she was eating was just buckwheat that she brought from home. She even brought a pot that she would just pour water, get ready, like leave the buckwheat for 10 minutes, and just eat buckwheat twice a day.
Right.
She wouldn't spend any money, like even inside the city, like, for example, when we could take a bus, it's like, I don't know, several cents. She's like, no, I'm walking, like for 6-7 kilometers, just walking. Like,
amazing. Yeah, no, definitely reminded me of kind of the stories of Malaysia and eating ridiculously cheaply. The first time I went to Iceland, again, I went with quite a big group of people because we went on holidays, so all 5 of us crammed into one hire car. And like the cost of accommodation and stuff. But also, everywhere we went, we kind of went, oh, we'll go to this next place, and I'm sure there'll be like a shop there that we can buy some food. But it was like Sunday, and basically in the country, no supermarkets are open on Sundays. Or they close really early, so we'd get to the next town, and obviously that's just a cultural thing that they're like, no, it's Sunday. We all know that the shops aren't open on Sunday just because you're used to 24-hour conveniences wherever kind of you've come from. So we literally the entire trip just bought spaghetti from the garages tomatoes. And to begin with, we were like putting extra veg in, as in like a tin of sweet corn or a tin of peas. In fact, no, we were putting them both in at the same time. And I basically said, not a big fan of sweet corn. Could we maybe have like one day of tomato, peas, and pasta? Sweet corn and pasta, and tomatoes and pasta.
Fancy.
One other guy literally just ate dried noodles the entire time. A lot of people get there and just realize how hideously expensive it is, because you can get really cheap flights to Iceland, especially from the States. And I think their like national air company, they kind of do, you can go to Europe, but you can also take a stopover in Iceland for like 2 to 4 days. So a lot of people do, I'll do that. I'm on a cheap flight. And they get to Iceland and just realize they've emptied their pockets in Iceland and, got no money.
Oh my God.
That's a good strategy, actually. That's a good country strategy, marketing strategy. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it really sounds like I'm going to admit and say that this is really at least my cheap thrill that can I provide nutrition to my body on the road with the least amount of money that I spend. So I remember when we were traveling in France. So I was traveling with a bunch of travel buddies. So there wasn't a fixed travel partner. And one time there was this guy, and we managed to find a super cheap hotel, and we basically went to some nearby supermarket, and we bought big baguettes, which were like for €1 there were 2 baguettes, and we basically went to some kind of McDonald's or some place to steal essentially a bunch of mayonnaise and ketchup.
Oh
and
my God!
That's what we ate for lunch and dinner. And I when I share this, one would think that you should be ashamed of being so cheap, but I'm really not. I'm very excited and I'm very thrilled to share that this is how low we went in terms of our budget travels. And it's, now that I think about it, it was not only about saving money, but it was also about the thrill of how you can do more with less, so that the next day when you step out and you see, like, I'm crazy about museums, and I know Vicky is as well. If there's a beautiful museum out there, and if the ticket, at least for a student, €16 is not nothing, I would want to save the money from food to pay the €16 entry ticket to that museum, right? So that at least I can spend the whole day in the museum, and it will be totally worth eating that baguette and mayonnaise for the 3 meals of that day.
Yeah, like I definitely think food is a really obvious place that you can save on your budget, and I definitely do that in my day-to-day life. But I guess it's also worth throwing in there that food is such a massive part of cultures, that it's definitely worth taking time out of your strict budget. Yeah, to try the local food.
Yeah, that's true.
And obviously save up, not kind of eat out every single night for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. But kind of, also kind of include that in your experience, and don't just write it off.
How about you, Adi? Have you ever worked while traveling?
The only time I've so-called work, and it wasn't really working for money, but it was working for barter trade. So when I was in Bali, I was between jobs. I had taken a 3-month sabbatical, and when I was in Bali, so people usually go to the south of Bali, and I go, for your listeners, I personally don't recommend to go anywhere near south of Bali unless you're like, you love tourist traps. You should explore northern and western Bali more than anything. So so just to kind of get by in terms of food, I managed to find a bar, and I made a deal with them that I'll work for you, not as a bartender, but just doing the back end washing and taking out the trash and everything for basically the whole night. And in return, we basically use their kitchen to eat food. Yeah, and they had not imposed any restrictions that you can only take 2 slices and 2 eggs. It was just a kitchen and a refrigerator and a bunch of vegetables for us to use. So that was kind of a barter trade that that not just myself, there was a bunch of people, and we made with them. The perk for that bar is that they get to put a bunch of non-Balinese or non-local faces. I don't know, just for the thrill of making the local sea foreigners serving them drinks. I don't know what value that holds in terms of business, but hey, I'm not complaining.
I guess they don't have to pay you a salary, do they? You're working for free, so it's saving them money.
Right. And if I think about it now, because now that I'm older and boring, now that I think about it, it may also not be completely legal to do that. But there are these kind of unorganized labor of tourists that you see. I bet it's not just in Southeast Asia, but maybe Southeast Asia is more popular. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really, really common, and that is definitely another way, because I kind of obviously went and basically learned a skill and got a qualification in an attempt to work around the world. Well, I did work around the world. But yeah, I think that is a really common thing to do, that people turn up and either they work as a cleaner in a hostel for free accommodation,
Right.
or work behind a bar just for maybe like a little bit of money, or some kind of in exchange for food and stuff. Yeah, that's definitely another really, really good way to keep your budget low and to travel and work and have those different experiences.
Yeah, also to explore local culture. Yeah, for sure. I didn't work while I was traveling, but I volunteered a few times, and it was a really good experience to get to know local culture.
Yeah, and was that kind of just ad hoc volunteering, or did you arrange that before you went?
I arranged it before I went. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Was that like
there's
Workaway?
Workaway. There's through the Workaway
there you go.
website. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So once it was Workaway, and also I met some travelers who recommended me a place where they volunteered before. So one of the times I volunteered at the previous place of the person that I met. So
that's a good way of doing things.
Okay. But you know what? I have seen. It didn't happen to me, but I saw a bit of a backlash. So this was in China, in the Yunnan province. There's this place called Lijiang. It's a tourist trap. So even the tourists from within China, they flock to that part of China, and it's a very beautiful place, very historical city, and there is a lot of backlash against what people like to call backpackers. So they are, at least the argument there is that, hey, Mr. or Miss Foreigner, you're here as a tourist, and you should be kind of contributing to the economy by buying local products and patronizing local services, but instead you're here illegally setting up your trinkets shop or your massage shop or whatever it is, and you're kind of taking money away from the economy just to fund your travel. I personally don't feel anything strongly for or against it, but I can appreciate if there's some frustration among the locals. The only time that it kind of happened to me was because this was in Cambodia, and I was helping a friend who I still happen to help. She had like a bunch of bags or something, and I thought, okay, you know what, I'll just go to the night market, I will just put those bags there, and I will sell them for $2-3, and whatever I can get, I will just give it to my friend. And this was not because I'm very charitable or whatever. I just wanted to see the night market, just as you mentioned, right, that it's kind of nice way to see the get absorbed in the local culture. But as soon as I set up, a restaurant manager came and basically scolded me in the Khmer language, and body language speaks louder than actual language, so I just got the heck out of there. Yeah, so I don't know what you guys feel about this backpacker acquisition.
Well, I'll let you go first, Vicky.
It depends. Like, I haven't specifically. I've heard of one friend who I know set up a bit of business when he was traveling around the States, selling books. But I think that's a fairly common thing for the local people to do. Is to basically kind of buy something like the kind of Scout Girl cookies sort of thing. People to buy a load of stock and then go knocking on doors, bothering people, basically trying to persuade them to buy stuff. But I don't know enough about his story. I'd have to ask him kind of more detail about how that came about and why he was doing it. But I haven't really heard of other people setting up trinket stores as they're traveling around in any other country. I kind of did with the volunteering thing.
Right.
When I was like 15, 16, signed up to one of these big company things where we went to Ecuador for a month, and you go and you spend a week in a local school. Definitely as a teenager, we all thought that was such a cool thing to do, and it was advertised as this life-changing experience that you had to save up loads of money for. But obviously the company kind of had your back. You had all kinds of satellite kind of phones and things, and you had training in the UK before you went out, so they really kind of beefed it up to go out there. And then we spent a week in the local school painting walls, and did like a sports day with the kids, and just spent a week there. And as far as we were concerned, we were helping But again, many years down the line, and kind of being a bit more mature and understanding it better, and I realised that kind of thing specifically actually takes away jobs from the local people. Like, it would have been better off if we had just funded maybe, I don't know, the paint, or helped pay a local painter to kind of do that work, or help the local carpenters to whatever, build the trees and bits and pieces. So I think you've got to be quite careful on the volunteering front as to whether it's actually useful to the local community for you to feel good about doing that. Whereas if it's somebody that does have a farm and they're kind of on that whole woofing website, or there's another one, I think, like Travel X or Volunteer X or something. Like, they're people that specifically are asking for volunteers to help them out because maybe the local community doesn't have sort of those kinds of skills, or they need a lot of people to help with a harvest or whatever. Yeah, I think that's a whole another kind of worms about us kind of going over and volunteering in some sense. But in other sense, obviously, it is really, really helpful. And it's absolutely amazing for people to go and be able to have that experience, probably stay on a farm stay and help local people if that's what they want. But maybe I'm looking into it a bit too. I was going to say, a friend of mine, well, an old colleague, he went to Sri Lanka after a fairly recent tsunami, kind of not the most recent one, but one of the first ones. And he said he turned up in Sri Lanka as an architect and was like, how do I help? And basically all the local people totally had it covered. They were there making things with their hands, just didn't have the woodwork skills to really help. And he said that he basically, I think, felt a bit silly to go over there and think, I can help in some way and I'm going to volunteer. And again, he realised that he might have just been better off sending the money that he spent on the flights to the local people and helping them build it.
But then it doesn't sound like your friend's plan was to travel to Sri Lanka. It was genuinely to, all hands on deck kind of situation that, okay, I have a certain set of skills and I think the people there could use it. Yeah, and it wasn't really for traveling, right?
No, not necessarily. Yeah, it was very much, and obviously it was completely heartfelt that he went over there and wanted to volunteer his time. But I guess it's useful, and definitely the volunteer service here in the UK asks you to have a specific skill to kind of go over somewhere if you're, basically if you have a specific skill to go and help, so that you really are helping in a place that needs it. Because I know that the Americans have a system, I think it's called the Peace Corps. I'm fairly confident it is. Yeah. It's a big deal for a lot of people, and they save up for many years. I don't know how old you have to be to go and do it. And then kind of you get a lot of training and you go out and really, really help. And unfortunately, we don't have that same system here in the UK. Kind of the volunteer service thing really asks you to have a specific skill, which I think is unfortunate and maybe also a good thing at the same time. It's definitely one of those double-edged swords, I think, volunteering abroad.
Yeah.
It's kind of, I suppose one of the ways of thinking about volunteerism is that it kind of helps you think of places that you would not otherwise think of. So you would probably not go volunteering to Japan, but you could go volunteering to Ecuador, right? Like you mentioned. So maybe Ecuador wasn't on your wish list, and this opportunity opens up and it kind of makes you think about, okay, maybe I can spend a month or spend a few weeks volunteering in Ecuador. And since I'm there, and it's on at least for me, it's on the other side of the planet, it'll be worth my while to spend a week or two to travel and see what's different about Ecuador compared to Singapore. But I also think that if people want to genuinely, if their first priority and their first intention is to travel, this is just my personal view, I think the best way to still finance your travels is to save up on your regular expenses. So you find the cheapest ticket, so you don't care about the transit, how long the transits are. And if you're going for just like a weekend trip, then I get it. Okay, you don't want to transit for 6 hours for a 3-day long weekend trip. But if you're going for 2 weeks, you save up on cheap flight tickets, you go for guest houses instead of hotels, you go for hostels instead of hotels, and you save up in terms of Right. Okay. So one of the things that, again, we keep coming back to Kyrgyzstan because everybody loves Kyrgyzstan. So I remember that when I was there, and like lo and behold, I found out that the World Nomad Games are taking place, and I had no freaking clue that the World Nomad Games were taking place there. And one of the events was in a valley that was really far from the main city. And if I had taken a taxi by myself, say again?
It was in Kherchen Valley.
Yeah, Kherchen Valley, right?
Yeah,
and if I had taken a taxi all by myself, and as a clearly non-Kyrgyz face, I would have probably got ripped off. And I was very fortunate that I managed to find a travel buddy from the hostel itself, and I think there were at least 3 of us who managed to share a taxi ride. And these are like good old tricks that you can use to finance your trip. But having said that, I have a lot of respect for people who are like bloggers and vloggers, and there are these brilliant YouTubers who genuinely finance their travels through creating great content. I know I can't do that. I don't think I have the patience or the skill to do that. But yeah, I don't know. The easy way out is just to just spend less money. I don't know. It doesn't seem that complicated to me.
Yeah, well, before I share with my thoughts, I want to give a shout out to Ringo's Guest House in Malaysia, Malacca, where I volunteered, and also Negar Guest House, in Varzan, Iran. So, I actually, agree with you in some way, Azi, that it's good to save up on regular expenses. I remember a story of one Thai girl who wasn't drinking, the bubble tea for 1 month, and she saved like $200 or $300. So I think it's
love bubble tea. How can you give it up?
So that's a great way, I think, to save up. Also, of course, like as you're working, to save up from work. But people who are working and traveling, I think, for example, if they're making something, or if they play some kind of instrument, I've met quite a few musicians. I think it's okay. I mean, as long as they're doing something in order to sell their skills, it's a free market. So I mean, I think it doesn't matter. Like, even if it's not a local person, local or not local, whoever likes the music or whoever likes the things that this traveler made, I think if he or she wants to buy, why not? But but what is annoying for me is when travelers, they sit somewhere and then they say, I have no money, please help me. In that case, I'm like, for me, I don't know, it's a little bit annoying. I think, well, if you don't have money, why don't you just go back home, earn more money, and then come back? Because it kind of makes, I think, obligation. I remember one guy, I don't remember which country he was, but he was in the south and he had this sign. So kind of local people felt obligated in order to take him to their home. He spent, I think, a week with them, and then they contacted the embassy, and then he was deported back to his country.
Why was he deported?
Because, I mean, he didn't have any money, and then, I don't know, like, he didn't save enough. He was like trying to gather more as he was sitting, but maybe he didn't have enough. I'm not sure. Or maybe locals, because he was a foreigner and he couldn't explain. So the locals thought that, he needs help. So they contacted the embassy, and then the embassy decided that he needs to go back. I'm not sure. But like this kind of, like, when I see travelers, I don't feel like helping them because they ran out of money.
Yeah, but definitely if you run out of money, just like you would back home, try and find a way of making it. Or I guess if you absolutely can't for some reason work, maybe because you're not comfortable doing illegal work for kind of cash in hand, or visas are way too complicated.
I mean, especially now, there are so many opportunities where you can like work or volunteer and just get free accommodation, free meals. I think there are so many opportunities that you can do even without money. So
so there's two perspectives, right? So Aigul, you mentioned something interesting, that at least even on a personal level, I share your sentiment that, hey, if you're, let's say, playing the guitar, or if you're making beautiful armbands or bracelets, and you're a willing seller, I'm a willing buyer, then I'm happy to pay whatever it is, and then I'll move on with my life as a local, and you hopefully can sponsor your travel. However, we have to be respectful of the local laws, regardless of whether we agree with the local laws or not. And some countries take this issue very, very seriously. And I personally, so I like to treat myself as a second-class citizen when I'm in a foreign country, not because I have less dignity than the locals, but because it's just like I'm in someone else's house. So I need to wash my steps, I need to wash my words, I need to wash my activity, and to make sure that I'm playing by the house rules, right? So if the house rules suggest that nope, I cannot be earning any kind of money, whether it's on the street playing the guitar or working in a bar, if the local laws say that that's impermissible, then
Fine,
at least I personally feel you should not do that, even if you disagree that no, this is free market, I have a valuable service to give, why not? I would personally not recommend violating local laws, because you're in somebody else's house, right? Regardless of your personal values.
Yeah, I can see that.
If it's useful to volunteer and you want to do that, yeah, absolutely do that to save money, or just spend a bit of time out, basically, rather than constantly being on the road and looking at all of the whatever museums and nice shiny things. Definitely to get kind of a closer feel and cultural experience, I think.
Yeah,
in the
sorry. In response to your I don't know, statement, Vicky, I just wanted to add, for example, I see why you are not very positive about volunteering, but for example, I've had quite a few volunteers, and even on a farm, when you have a volunteer who is volunteering for I don't know, let's say 5 hours a day, and usually the skills that volunteers have and locals have, they are very different. And the volunteer, I think it will take him really long time if he really wants to replace a local volunteer or local worker. First, he doesn't speak the local language. Second, he doesn't know the culture. And third, it's, I don't know, I think the working principles differ as well. It's very rare case. Yeah, for example, in my case also, I run a hostel and then I have volunteers quite often. It's usually the way you work with volunteers is different with how you work with local people, because their skills are different, their mentalities, the way they think is very different. So for me, it's very different people, they cannot replace each other.
Yeah, definitely. I guess the volunteers are just there short term, aren't they? So they're obviously going to have a different mindset.
Exactly. If the farmer is really serious about his business, I think he will not give this kind of manual job to volunteer, because you can use the volunteer in a different way. Most of the volunteers, I've been quite lucky, they're quite good with marketing, for example, with photography, something that locals, for example, are not that good at. So
I also, Vicky, you shared something very interesting, and this is something that I share with Aigul as well, that in Southeast Asia, so the typical image of solo travel is that someone with a big fat backpack is traveling for weeks, if not months. And that's not exactly true, because in Southeast Asia, there are a lot of us who, I'm sure that happens in Europe as well, where there's close proximity between countries, where you see a long weekend and you make a solo trip because none of your friends could be bothered to book the tickets on time. And that kind of solo travel is very popular in and around Singapore, in Southeast Asia. And for that, you don't need to jump through too many hoops in terms of, okay, let me go to work away and let me go find a volunteering opportunity. Let me go teach English in the middle of Cambodia. Don't really need to do that. You just need to set some money aside. And I suppose you also need to do your research, because if you go, let's say you go to Vietnam, and you realize that the exchange rate in airports is far worse than the exchange rate in the market, then you can save a bunch of bucks by doing that research beforehand and taking your cash all the way to your guest house, to your hostel, and then stepping out to the market to change it to the local currency, right? Those are far more kind of sure shot and definite ways of saving money. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's all very much kind of depends on your timeline, absolutely. Because some people, do pack their job in and go for months and months on end, and then other people are solo traveling from their usual base.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it depends on your timescale. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, it's a really good discussion, guys. I think we haven't discussed the working while traveling topic. So, and we've discussed, we all know each other, and but we all have so many different perspectives, and it's just 3 of us.
I don't remember the amount of time.
So thank you guys for participating today. It was Adi's second time. I forgot to mention that at the beginning. At the Solopacker podcast. So it was really nice talking to you guys, discussing with you. I'll think over the ideas that you shared today. Maybe some of my perspective changes. Who knows? But
same here. Yeah.
It's. Thank you for being my guest today. It was a pleasure to host you. And let's keep in touch.
Definitely.
Alrighty. Thanks for having us, Aigul.
Yeah, thank you guys.